Hello, friends, family, and keepers of the faith, to my blog, episode 38, dated 13th of November 2022. Now, if you've stayed all the way through episode 38, then you will know that I have difficulty starting these blogs on, how to introduce things. I've done some little jokey things, or I've talked about the weather, etc. And this one is no different, other than just before I hit the record button, I reminded myself that it's Remembrance Sunday. Now, Remembrance Sunday isn't something that was big in my family, or anything sort of like retro to me, but with the Queen passing away this year, I thought to myself just before I started, we now move forward into a new era, and I think that we should look at those sort of things ourselves every day. Every day is a day to make a change to yesterday. Do things differently, put a smile on rather than a frown, that sort of thing. I think it's difficult, though, to remind ourselves to do that. So I'm going to try and make a bigger point of trying to do that. But when it comes to the weather, might as well talk about it. It's actually been a weird week. It started off terrible. It got so bad with the rain that my coat that I normally wear, it started to soak through. And I remembered that I had some chemicals, some spray that you could re-waterproof your shoes and clothes with. And I sprayed my coat after I dried it out, and went out the next day, and lo and behold, it started to rain halfway through my walk, and no water came through. So go figure, I bought something that actually worked. That was quite good. So with all that out the way, remembrance, all the weather and all that sort of stuff, the other thing that I was able to do with the weather was it changed Thursday and Friday and Saturday to much milder weather. Now, take it like this: we're now at November 13th, and yesterday I got the lawnmower out and managed to do one more mow of my lawn. That would never happen. I mean, take it like this: I've got a petrol mower. You're not supposed to keep petrol over winter in canisters and stuff. All the crap that's in fuel sinks to the bottom. It clogs the carburetor. When you have a petrol mower, they recommend that you drain the petrol out of the mower. I had to put it all back together and put just enough fuel in to do this mowing of the lawn yesterday. And then, of course, I'd planned it so well earlier this year that the canister had no fuel in it. But because I could get another mow in before the end of the year, I had to go out and buy fuel. And oh my God, there I was thinking I was going to buy like £5 worth of fuel. I filled the canister up because they're only small containers, like 5 litres. It was nearly a tenner. My God, just so many things that I didn't consider. But I mowed the lawn, got rid of all of the cuttings, had a nice day, sort of like just looking at the plants and seeing if there was any weeding that I needed to do, just in case it goes really bad from now. And my mother thanked me for doing such a lovely job. So there's a reward at the end. The biggest reward I get generally is my mother telling me what a good job I've done. That cheers me up no end. So we start off with the news. We've got all that out the way. And we always talk about the war. So I just wrote these little news articles to date stamp this video. I've got no opinion about it whatsoever. But when I look back at these videos, I can go, that was the week this happened. You know, it's that sort of thing. So the war, it continues. Ukrainian soldiers welcomed into city of Kherson after Moscow said it had fully withdrawn its troops from the key city. Parties went on into the night. Kherson was the only major city Moscow managed to take in the 9 months of the war starting. So what we're trying to say here is that Ukraine was soldiers were welcomed back into the city because Moscow withdrawn from a strategic city as part of this war, and it's the only city they've taken in 9 months. And here we are with so many bad things happening because of this war, you know, the lack of food, lack of fuel, all sorts of stuff, and they took one city. If that doesn't highlight this war should end, I don't know what doesn't. Then there was one that I brought this brought to mind because it was something that my mate Mainmeister said in one of his waffles. And by the way, you should watch his waffles. They're absolutely great, because I tell you what, I'm a nosy bastard and I just want to know what everybody's doing. But anyway, he brought up something about Twitter, and it was about the blue tick subscription. So go and watch that. It was from a couple of weeks ago. So Twitter has halted its $8 blue tick subscription offering as a number of company accounts received the verification tick. A user claiming to be Eli Lilly tweeted that insulin was free. That lost the company 4% on the stock market. So basically, this verification system doesn't work because they handed out blue ticks to people that aren't actually companies. They then go and tweet something stupid like, today you can get all of your electronic devices for free if you take this into this store or whatever. And caused so much uproar that the stock market folded on that company by 4, 5, 6, 7, 8%. Go figure. This subscription service, just to prove that you are who you are. It's just a mad world. I agreed with what Mainmeister said. It's a crazy world where you have to pay money to say, yes, this is me. Mental. And then the last one was about the Queen, because I think it'll probably be the last thing that I'll do to mention her, really. Her last, this is how it went. Her last Order of Merit is honoured this week. Children's presenter Floella Benjamin receives the award and is the first black woman to get this award. The appointments for the Order of Merit were made days before her death. So this was a little article that made me think, isn't that great that, you know, that you're the Queen, you're still head of state, life goes on, you make choices, then you die. And as a parting sort of like gesture, those things that she was still putting her signature to are still being met today, for this overlap of our new King Charles. So I thought that was quite poignant, and of course it works in a little bit in my blog, because Floella Benjamin was a children's presenter on Play School and other BBC children's shows, and I remember her. She was very energetic, very smiley, very fun to be around, it would seem, when they were filming it, and good for her to get something. Thought that was absolutely marvellous. You have to excuse me, I've not been well the last 2 weeks, but I'm starting to get better, but my throat is drying up. So I'll try to keep that to a minimum, but that's a little bit better. So what I do usually do now after the news is the shout outs, which I love to do because each and every one of you has basically made a comment or a question or something that I'm about to read out. And I've put out a little bit more content, just one extra one this week. And so I'm reading out all the names that have ever commented about anything that I've done this week, including a live stream that I did. So, people I'd like to shout out to are Martroyd, Highlander, Colin Jones, Mark Whatever, Lord Evil, Scott Brion, got that correct this week, Rocket Bunny, Steve's Gaming, Cauldron of Stardust, Down the Rabbit Hole, Denny, Milfy Swimbuckle, Ian Batchelor, 20th Century Gaming, Mainmeister, Ponder, Jambon, Colin Ferguson. Like I say, the thing about this blog is that I get to read comments, and a lot of them are well wishes towards me, hoping that I'm well, that my mother's well. My mother enjoys that. And it makes me feel needed or wanted, and puts a smile on my face generally. So that was really good. And so some of them are incredibly long. I mean, they're detailed like anything. And I just want to thank those people for doing that. Honestly, I hope it was fun writing the comment down. I don't want it to be a chore. Who wants to give somebody homework or something to do? It's just when you have time on your hands, a bit like a prisoner. That's a famous Porridge episode, isn't it? Time on our hands. Then you look forward to these little things, you know, like you look forward to the orange centre that's in a box of chocolates. I look forward to a comment written on a video that I pressed record on one day this week. You know what I mean? So it's really good. So we've got some questions. I'm going to read them out. Not going to do them in any particular order. In fact, I don't think I answered many comments this week. So pretty much, even if these answers are going to be a one-word answer, I didn't answer it. I brought it into this like a topic. So the first one we've got is Milfy. Good old Milfy. We love Milfy. He's done a question for me every week, so you can imagine up to the number that we're at the moment for my blog. He's done riddles, questions, all sorts. So his question is, can you remember what it was, apart from just wanting to do a vlog in your case, unless there was another reason, that made you start a YouTube channel? What made you wake up one day and think, bollocks to it, I'm going to give this YouTube malarkey a go? Also, when you first started off, can you remember how confident you were, as say a percentage of your channel becoming popular? He just looked up, by the way, and found that I was around about 70 subscribers. Though nowhere near the likes of Mainmeister, it's still a decent number for a young and growing channel at this stage. As a secondary question, has your channel blown away your original realistic expectations of what it could reach in popularity? That's a detailed question, and one that pretty much every time I hit the record button, I think to myself, what am I doing this for? But it's quite easy that when I was doing stuff with Mainmeister, all those, a year or so back, I was always asked the question, you seem so at ease doing this, why haven't you got your own channel? And I always said, well, there is a confidence thing in this. So I'm not a very confident person. And B, you guys do it so much better than I think I could do. I don't know enough about editing. I don't know enough about splicing things together. I know the research side of things. I could do that. And I made no qualms in saying that I always wanted to collaborate on something. But to actually do it myself, I balked at it. And I was just happy that I was being invited to, to a like a conference call, sort of like a chat that was being broadcast, usually with Mainmeister, about talking about anything really that was going on that week. It could have been a topic about computers. It could have been anything. We even did ones on bullying, which I was I was very proud of that particular episode. That was with Panther as well. And the one thing about it is that I don't think my family and friends, when I'm gone, would have known to look for it. So things happened to me at work. They were getting worse. I noticed that on certain days I couldn't care less about my appearance. Certain days I did, and I was in a better frame of mood. And I thought to myself, I've done diaries in the past. I've got books of diaries going back to when I was 7 years old and beyond. And it's full of highs and lows. So I basically decided, why not do a video diary? Some people call them blogs, V-blogs, just blogs. And I didn't want to do a written exercise. I didn't want to come home and start writing down my thoughts. My, spelling is atrocious. Also I do things on phones where it auto-corrects and it makes you look bad. I knew that I'd do a lot of umming and ahhing, but I wanted something that was of the moment. That's it, of the moment. And I wanted to do it so that if people then watched it in order from episode 1 or blog 1, they can see the journey that I've gone to get to get to where we are now. And they can see whether things are getting better, worse, what's made me happy, what's not made me happy. Give an insight into things that make, the things I've bought, the things that have, that I've, the reason why I bought them, the ones that I consider to be worth something, the ones that are not. And so when I'm gone, I've left something behind, because the other thing is, although I don't think it's as important as it was, I think I'm the last of my line. Yes, so my dad and his brother, they had kids, got married. My dad's brother, my uncle, had a daughter. My father had me and my sister. My sister got married. But of course, when any time you're looking at a family tree, the family tree is all about the line of the male part, because that's the bit that keeps the surname. And I'm not married. I've got no kids. I can talk about that another time, but there is a question mark on that in my past, which I still believe I haven't got a child, but there is a question mark on that one. And so I have to think about, when I leave something behind, I've only got my nephew and nieces that might want to know what I've been up to while they've been living their lives. And they might want to see a moving image of my mother, because we haven't got many of my father. When I lost my father, that's the one thing where I said, if I go upstairs, there isn't a photograph of me in the last 20 years. If I look at, there's pictures of my father, they're the ones I've taken. I don't know how many of my sisters got, but we've got no video footage, nothing like that. And what am I therefore leaving behind? Not a lot. So that was the point of that. How confident am I? Not that great, not that much, but I hope I'm more at ease talking to the camera. And I have to thank really you guys, because I think you make me feel at ease. Am I happy about 70 subscribers and all of that? I've brought it up in the past, and I'll tell you why. It's not jealousy on how somebody else started at the same time as me and they're now into the 200s or whatever. It's that. It's I keep putting the emphasis on you guys to ask me questions. At some point it's going to become a drag, and when I'm presenting something like this, in my mind I'm thinking that I'm on a plinth talking to a room where you're all looking at me, and I'm speaking to you about topics and things. So wouldn't it be great that that room gets larger and larger, and those people then have a chance to ask me a question? So it was more about that. I think I've answered everything you've put, and I hope that's a sensible answer, Milfy, and the fact that I feel more at ease since episode 1. Episode 1 was just a 10-minute short saying, this week I'm going to do this. I'm going to do a blog, and it's going to be every week, and it's going to be the warts and all of videos, and hopefully I've been okay with that charter. So that's that. So who we got next? We've got Denny. Denny's great, got his own channel, likes his text adventures, incredible amount of knowledge in regards to retro scene, in regards to films, telly, computers, and his comments, honestly, they read like somebody's doing some sort of paper for a teacher, a retrospective on things. So I won't go into some of the things he's put, but my God, it's worth having a read. His question to me is, what, in my opinion, made the 80s era special? And I have to look back at it and go, do you know what? I think the 80s is my special decade. Thinking about where I was born and where we are now, I look back more at the 80s. And I think I look more back at the 80s because I think it was a period of growth. So I was now, that's your teenage and your early 20s part of your life. And you've gone from nursery to primary school to secondary school to leaving school to going to work. And during that period, things have changed. You've bought music, your music taste has changed. You've bought clothes, your clothes have changed. And of course, we've got my passion, which is film and computers and electronics in general. And during that period, I've had many computers and consoles and played many games, and it all melds in with the news at the time. So it's the growth of the 80s with the journey that I went through during that era that makes the era special to me. I think that's the best way of answering it, because like I say, you can look at the film industry and go, wow, that looks shoddy. The 30s films, the 40s films, the 50s film, and you can look at them and go, wow, how did they do that when there was no computers or anything to do it with, and all of that sort of stuff, the ingenuity of it all. And you can get to the 80s and see the change between model work and computer generated stuff. And I tend to find that the stories haven't changed too much, the writing hasn't changed too much, the way that it's been filmed has changed, and you can see that change. So animation turned into ray traced animation and so forth and so forth. You know, I mean, it's that sort of thing. When it comes to music, it's gone from big orchestras to synthesizers, back to orchestras again. There's that cycle. I'm sure at some point you've heard the expression, it won't be long before the miniskirt is back in fashion. That's because things go round in cycles. The 80s, we keep coming back to the 80s, and every time we do, it's always been the sounds of the 80s. Do you know what I mean? Rather, not too much about the sights. So, I hope that answers it. The 80s were special to me because it was my huge expansion of growth into what makes me me, and the fun aspect of it all, and the highs and lows made me what I am today. So I think that's a good enough answer. Rocket Bunny. So, oh my God. Again, lots and lots of comments till we get to the bit at the bottom with the question. Question for this week. I see you're sporting a very striking superhero t-shirt this week. Made me think of what my favourite t-shirts that I wear the most. Do you have any favourites you always wear? Maybe you could share them in your next stream. Now, I've considered that. I might do that, but not this week. But I've answered the question before about T-shirts. And generally, T-shirts to me are what's hanging about when I don't want to wear a work shirt. But because I've been off work waiting for a solution to my dilemma of my job title, and, of course, getting my blood pressure down to go back to work, I've worn more and more T-shirts. Now, these T-shirts are all Marvel T-shirts, and the reason for that is that the way you bought comics in the 90s and the 2000s was a book came out called Previews. You went into any comic store, you asked to look at previews, it would tell you what's coming out in 3 months' time. And this book didn't just have comics in it, it had statues, it had glassware, T-shirts, bandanas, all sorts, right, for it. And you had to put a tick next to the item so that the shop owner could pre-order it so that in 3 months' time it would arrive. Now, I already had a subscription to the comics. You know, I'd say every week, or every month, put this comic aside for me. Here's the ones I want. I want Spider-Man, Fantastic Four, Avengers, Iron Man, and so forth. But the previews that you had to pre-order were things like statues and stuff, because those are 100, 200 odd pounds for the statues, first of all. And then the T-shirts are like Fruit of the Loom, coming from America. They are actually coming from America over on a boat. So T-shirts would be Fruit of the Loom and all sorts of stuff. And you put those down, and you had to leave a deposit for what the price of it was, with the price possibly about to change, because it was done by the currency conversion at the time. So every month I'd put down 2, 3, 4 ticks next to T-shirts, a couple next to posters, one against a statue, whatever. Yep. And so after a while, you do that every month, and there are 12 months in a year. It's 12 times 4 T-shirts. There you are. 48 T-shirts in a year that you've bought. And they were all American Fruit of the Loom, and they were all in cellophane, never opened. Now, I suddenly started to wear them. And back in the day, I always wore, shirts like this. This is what I used to go to work in. When I first started to work, I wore waistcoats. I had those horrible, gaudy looking, like you're just about to you're going to a wedding. You know what I mean? Those patterned type waistcoats. Don't think I could get in one now. But T-shirts was something that's this year I've worn more of. And of course, you always wore them when you went to the gym. You always wore them when you were doing something that was excessive to your health because of sweat and all of that sort of stuff. So these T-shirts have become a godsend. Now, if you want to know how many I've got, I haven't counted them, but they would be in the hundreds. Most of them are still in the cellophane. I've just cycled round a couple that I've opened, and good job I did, because what I opened up, I put it on, wonderful, clean, beautiful. Took it off, it ripped round the neckline, and that's because it had been in the cellophane for 15, 16 years. So I hope that's answered your question, Rocket, because I don't really have a favourite. I've bought t-shirts when I've been to concerts. I've bought t-shirts when I've been to places that I've visited. So I've got no end of Planet Hollywood. My God, how many... Ask a question to you guys out there. How many Planet Hollywoods have you, t-shirts have you got? Or I visited Las Vegas, or whatever, you know, t-shirts have you got? But of course my big ones have been Marvel characters and computer games, you know, the Atari symbol, the Commodore symbol. I've got a number of those. They're all quite my favourite, but my body changes every week. I'm a bit thinner, or I'm a bit fatter, and all that sort of stuff. So I never really think about it, other than a t-shirt's just nice to throw on. Okay, just take another sip. Martroid, he's got a question for me this week. Just a quick question, if you have the time to answer in the next blog. What are you playing at the moment, just for your own fun? And he mentions what he's currently playing. He's playing through some Xbox 360 stuff at the moment. Well, the good news about doing a blog is that you're making public your life. So you now have the greater insight than my family of everything I'm doing. So every game I've played in the last 38 weeks is actually in these blogs, because I've done some games, you know, that have a retro feel but have been brightened up with new graphics. I'm doing my gaming history. So, you know, this week I've played Space Invaders, and from the streams you've seen the games that I've played in there. So, you know, I played Vampire Survivors and Survive Till Dawn, or whatever, you know. But there are a few things that you haven't seen, and those are things that I don't capture with any capturing device. And there has been the odd occurrence that I've put my PlayStation 5 on, and when I've done that, I've played Spider-Man mostly. I have got other games, but I tend to find that I have to learn the control mechanism again, because the games are a bit longer to play, and if you then spend a couple of weeks not going back to it, you've got to learn it all again and remember where you got to. And so you are enlightened in the fact that every game in the last 38 weeks, you know what I've played, because it's recorded for you to watch. And I hope that's good. And just to give you some background on that, it was wonderful going back to Space Invaders this week. I had a ball with that, really. Not only because it brought back the memories, but because I literally played that to death on the year it came out. But then there was nothing for 2 years. I never had a tabletop of that game. I had a couple of racing games and all that sort of stuff as tabletops. And until my Atari VCS version came out, and I'm pretty sure that was 1980, I didn't go back to it. And then there was tons of them when you got to the computer side of things, you know, when the VIC-20 came along and the Commodore 64, because there were clones. You could, even if it wasn't something that you could buy on a tape or a disc, there would be a type-in game listing for you to type in and play Space Invaders. No word of a lie. And at school, I had on one of my discs Pet Invaders. So yes, Space Invaders to me was a biggie. So I hope that's answered your question, Martroid. Mark whatever. So he's got a question for me. What computers did you have access to in education? And were they way behind in teaching compared to what you knew or could do at home? Or were they just useless computers at school, but no classes, no access, or nobody knew how they worked? a little bit of everything there, actually, Mark. I've mentioned this before. I've been in conversations with Mainmeister, and I mentioned to him that when I left primary school and went to secondary school, and we're talking 1980, 81, there was no computers at my primary school. We hadn't got to that point then. They were just about coming in. And in my secondary school, we had two computers. There were Commodore PETs and Apple IIes. And the trouble was they were in what they call the college part of the school. So we had what they call a campus of free schools. And in the middle of these free schools that were secondary schools, there was what they called the upper school, which was more like a college. And in there was where the science block was. And the science block contained the computer part of things. And you could join as a club, part of a club, if your maths level was high enough for you to do so. So you had to be in a grade 3 maths or above, grade 2, grade 1, to even be allowed into that environment. And luckily I was. And then when you joined computer club, they gave you one disc. That's it. Unless you wanted to go out and buy more, they gave you one disc as a freebie. And you could go to computer club there during lunch hours twice a week. Otherwise, it was reserved for people that wanted to do their studies, So most lunch times it was filled with people that had just had the lesson before and was writing new code for part of their subject matter. So I learned very quickly that you could make a double-sided disc by cutting a notch out of the left or right hand side of the disc, so you could turn it over and record on the other side. And I used to charge 50 pence for doing that. And that made me get a box of discs. I managed to get a box of discs in a week. But when it comes to being taught computers, that didn't happen until about halfway through the first year, start of the second year. And when I went to computer club, it was all about what the new game was. So I was telling you just now about Pet Invaders. So Pet Invaders was there. The first program I ever wrote was Lemonade Stand. We knew that the game was written. We could have it on our discs, but we had to write our own version of it. And I don't remember anybody cheating. We found this quite fun. We didn't have anybody cheat and just change the text of a person that had already written it. So you didn't have to rewrite the Go subroutines and all of the rest of it. They actually did write it from scratch. Every single letter was written from scratch. I don't know anybody who cheated. I didn't. And I learned an awful lot from that. But I also learned as I grew up and during the process that I'm just no good at languages. So my maths was okay. Never understood that either. The maths. The computer does the maths for you. Okay, yeah, you need to know a little bit about, Boolean algebra and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, I don't think you didn't need, the emphasis wasn't needed, I don't think, too much on the maths aspect, because the computer did a lot of the thinking for you. So, yeah, I hope that gives you an answer, really, that they were ahead and behind, because obviously they didn't have the BBC Bs, and those came out in 82 anyway. But the Apple IIes and Commodore PETs were still quite prevalent for 1980-81, I would say. And of course, my interest grew, and I am where I am now because of all of the computers that I've had from that moment. So, I've had ZX80s, 81s, VIC-20s, Commodore 64s, Amigas, RX. I've had plethora of them, and they're in my gaming history. And to be quite honest, I'm blessed, really. This particular time is the time where I had the most fun. So now we've got a combination question. I'm going to do Cauldron's first because Cauldron and Steve's question are the same, but Steve asks two questions. So the second question that Steve came out with, which is the same as Cauldron's, is if you could go back in time and witness one huge event in world history but cannot change anything, what would you choose to see at first hand? Okay, and Cauldron's went into much more detail. He gave events, the reason why, all sorts of stuff. Absolutely. I'll tell you what, Cauldron's knocked me for 6 when I was reading it because it's so detailed. Loved that. And of course, nothing wrong with Steve's either. And of course, I haven't done my salute to Steve, have I? So, you know, he knows I love Steve's great. I'm one of these people that I've had that question posed to me a lot because Marvel Comics did a series of comics called What If? And it involved an alien that lived on the blue side of the moon. They called it the blue side of the moon. And his name was Uratu or something like that. He was called the Watcher. And he observed events that go on. He could not interfere. And he also understood that there are parallel worlds where at some point you have to turn left or right in your life. And he followed the route down, not only observed the route where the person turned left, but then looked at the parallel one of if they'd turned right. An example of that is what if somebody else got bitten by a radioactive spider? What if a teenager became the Hulk and not a scientist? Etc., etc. So looking at this, you've got to be really a historian, haven't you? Because if you're going to go back and watch a major event, it's an historic one. And the only ones that come to mind are the ones really that Steve mentioned, which is, you know, things like Apollo 11, the assassination of JFK, and all of that sort of stuff. And the reason that we want to do that is they happen probably in our own time. I mean, I must admit, JFK is a bit of a stretch because I wasn't born then. Apollo 11 is pretty close to when I was born, but they're in history very close to where we were born. If you go back to 1492 and all of that sort of stuff, then you're living something that you took a fancy to when it was being explained to you in history class. And you might have, therefore, less or more of a want to do this. And anybody who's watched Doctor Who knows that he can go anywhere. He offers them wherever you want to go in time. And when I was a kiddie, it was bugger the time aspect. I want to go to another planet. So, yes, there are you know, the signing of the Magna Carta. You know, there is, but I definitely would want to know, be an observer of the assassination of JFK. I mean, I think it'll be the top end of a lot of people's lists because there is so much bureaucracy and hidden stuff going on in that, you know, why is it a magic bullet? Did two people try and do it? Was it really, you know, it's got so many questions, you want them answered, you know? I mean, I could mention from a minor point that the O.J. Simpson trial was big for me because it was just all over the news. It filled everything on telly. We know the result. Some people, well, still think it's a 50-50 split. Did he do it? Did he not do it? What if you're an observer? Would you like to go back to that day and find out what the truth was? That's the aspect of the question that I like the most. So I'm afraid mine's similar to Steve's in JFK. If it's a modern one, it might be the O.J. Simpson. You know, I'd love to, you know, not love to be there, but love to know all about, the blowing up of the space station, in 1986, 7, being the NASA control part. I'd love to be the fly on the wall all the way through Apollo 13. All the scientists trying to work out how they were going to clean the air, turn the carbon dioxide back to oxygen and all that sort of stuff. Going back in history, I'd love to be around a lot of important events of Queen Elizabeth I, the Virgin Queen, and Henry VIII. But I don't think I really want to go back too much further. I don't want to see the Big Bang. What would that be? One spectacular 1 second of activity and not a lot else after that for millions of years. The forming of the Earth would be quite good. But where am I going to sit for this? Oh, I think I'll end it there. So thank you, Cauldron. Thank you, Steve's Gaming, for that interesting question. And his first question is, this is Steve. I recently had a sneezing fit whilst coming downstairs, which caused me to drop my Nintendo Switch. It bounced off several steps and was destroyed. Have you ever dropped something or broken something due to your own mistake or accident? Yes. Now, I've done it lots, but not recently. And I think the one that I remember the most, would be one of my tabletop games. I think I had one of those, yes, it was one of them Tomy ones that you put up to your eyes, and Tomytronic, I'm pretty sure of it, that was supposed to be 3D, that I was coming down the stairs. It had a strap on it, and I was just holding it in my hand, and I accidentally didn't have my shoelaces tied quite, tripped, but it's one of those steps where you've got a big step and then all the small steps. It went round in an L, and I was at the top part of the next set of steps, slightly stumbled forward. It went down the stairs. It bounced off of about 3 stairs. When I got down the bottom, the lenses had fell out, the case had cracked. But the lesson learned with that was I took it to bits and put it back together, and it worked. Apart from one lens didn't quite fit correctly, and so it was distorted. And it didn't work via AC adapter anymore, only by battery. Never did work that one out. I think there might have been a crack on the board. So yes, that did happen to me, Steve. Brilliant question. Thank you so much. Then we've got Colin Jones. Great Colin Jones. Bullet points everything. Absolutely marvellous. And he's got a question. I've not had much to say this week, but for my question, I'm going to ask for a different slant on a topic. I've seen you make videos on, rather than modern remakes of old games, what are you favourite original games in a retro style? E.g., my current favourite is Donut Dodo. Yeah, Colin, I think I get that. I had to look up Donut Dodo because I didn't know about it, but it's on Steam, and it's very much a modern game written this year, but in the style of the old arcade games like Mr. Do and Dig Dug and all of that, those Mr. Do's Castle and all of that sort of stuff. And you want to know is, do I have a favourite of those? And I have to say this, it's very difficult for me to find a game. I don't know sometimes how to use Steam search engine. And I've typed in things like arcade and vector and all of this sort of stuff, and they've come up with different solutions, but I've never seen it. Never really comes up with a game that's written this year like a previous type game. A retro game with a new coat of paint. And that's why I did my series, because that's what I was trying to do, find something that was like Thrust, but it has been written this year. So it has that playability that you loved, but it has that modern gloss that makes you want to play it now. Heavy Burger, I think, is the closest one that I've got to that, and that came across because of a conversation I had with Mainmeister once, and it also came up in one of those bundles, and I think I've loaded it once and played it once, but I might be wrong there. I might not have even loaded it at all. I don't generally go for rewrites of Streets of Rage, but because the prices of them tend to be more than what I want to pay when I can play the original. So I really need to go back and do that, because I've spoken to you guys in Discord and you've all said how good the latest Streets of Rage is, the one that's on Steam, and the rewrite of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and all of that sort of stuff. But I think it's on record, the games that I've played that are like the past and had a retro and have had a modern thing put on it. Sentinel, I think, was the most fun I had doing my videos. It was called Zenith, I think. Followed closely by a modern retake of Attic Attack in 3D isometric form. And then there's been some lovely Thrust clones, Defender clones, all of that sort of stuff, going all the way to the worst, which was Arcadia. Everything else is documented in my videos, where I've done a random gameplay video, and even this week I've done a What If Thrust Met Nebulous, which is a wonderful game, and I've been playing it this week, and that's a favourite of mine now at the moment. But how long will it be a favourite of mine? Not sure. So hope that answers that question. I'm just going to quickly go back up now and see if I've missed anybody. And I don't think I have, no. So thank you so much for all of those questions. It takes up a huge section of this, but it's I think you get enjoyment of my thoughts, hopefully. Cauldron gave me the greatest compliment, saying that I answer my questions so well and go off in tangent and so forth. That makes me smile. I don't think I do. But you can see me just by me chuckling that I get great enjoyment out of it. And please, I hope this goes on as long as it can. I know that there's been talks about shelf lives of things. Mine is a different beast. It's a blog, it's a diary. Every week something has got to happen to you, otherwise why am I on this planet? I might as well end it now. So what have I watched this week? So we get to that stage now. So I've watched This Week in Retro on YouTube. They did a B-17 Flying Fortress section where Microprose are rewriting the game, along with a couple of others and one in VR. And they also talked about the Ferrari used in Outrun going for sale. In fact, they talked about the fact that there was only ever one, and if you see more than one, it's because it's been converted. I found that part of the car bit boring, and I found the B-17 one interesting. Like I say, This Week in Retro is sort of like a mainstay for me, and it's a little bit like Tomorrow's World. Some weeks, everything I'm interested in. Other weeks, there might be one out of 2 or 3 that I'm interested in, and other weeks, there's nothing. There was something this week, but minor, if you see what I mean. That's how it goes, isn't it, really? And as I told you, I watched this guy called Techmoan. He does mostly audio equipment. This time he did one that's sort of like sound and pinball related, if you want to know. It's a device called The Light. It came out in 1987. It was a box that had a jack at the back for sound in, mic in, and just an AC adapter. And it had what they call an LED arm. So it was an arm with lots of little LED lights. In fact, they came in 2 models, one a 40 LED model and one an 80 model. and it's really like a big propeller. Yeah, and when you turned it on, it span round. It span round at 1,000 revolutions per minute, I think. And then when you plugged an audio source into it, the lights went between 3 different colours. I think they were amber, red and green, to say what the limits of the audio that was coming in, and it was split into 2, bass and treble. So as it spanned round, when you played your music, pictures would form. Now, apparently this was designed and developed for a pinball table, and then given to people to buy as a curiosity piece, because obviously you could turn your music into video imagery. And wasn't that exactly what we did when we had our the skins on our MP3 players, where we always wanted to see the video, the music turned into some kaleidoscope effect, as plugins. So that was interesting. It was called the Light. You can still get them, but the older model is the ones to go for. They were built so much better in wooden frames, not plastic frames, and so forth. Then I watched Kim Justice. Kim Justice continued the journey of Telecom Soft, but now we'd moved on to magnetic scrolls, which meant text and graphic adventures like The Pawn, Guild of Thieves, etc. So this was an era quite important to me, because I always remember The Pawn, because it had an interlace mode with my monitor, and the graphics were just so stunning for a text adventure, you know what I mean? Where before they used to draw in vector lines and fill, or you'd have a basic picture made up of little blocks that looked a little bit like a tree. When we're talking a little bit about like the Scott Adams adventures, they weren't really vector and filled in. The Hobbit did that. Now we had pictures that were almost like digitized. They were artwork. And if you put your Amiga into a certain mode, a really high res mode, your screen had this sort of like flicker. It's hard for me to explain, but it's what they call an interlace mode. And the way that you could see the graphics were now changed. Instead of taking up the top part of the screen and the text scrolling up, you now had multiple windows. So you had a text window behind and a graphic window on top, and you could slide the graphics off the screen so you could continue to type. Wonderful times. So if you're remotely interested in magnetic scrolls, the adventure side of things, and those early 16-bit adventures, do look at Kim Justice's. And then there is retro gaming music. He's a great keyboard player, and just recently we've had the death of a C64 SID musician, and I then went back to my favourites that I've bookmarked in YouTube and found retro gaming music in my list. And he's got a keyboard like mine, a Tyros. Mine's just, if I can show a part of it, it's just there where my finger's pointing. And he's done lots and lots of SID tunes on his Tyros. So that is great for me to sometimes just settle back and listen. So I listen to that. Now we come to your stuff. So the first one on my list is Mainmeister. Like I say, Mainmeister is probably a mainstay of mine, because that's where I sort of like met you guys and started off. And he said such nice things to me this week. You know how it is, where things go on in your own life, and Mainmeister at the moment has got a lot going on, and a lot of exciting things as well. He's just got a Steam Deck and all of that sort of stuff. But because he needs to get his content out and I need to get my content out, and I am, not his son-in-law, or I'm not his brother, and we're miles apart from each other. Sometimes it's difficult to get together, if you see what I mean. But he started off a live waffle, and live waffles are great because you get to say what you want at the time, and so the questions were coming up, and obviously the subject of my blog came up. And he said such lovely things. These things are most appreciative, and I didn't. The weird thing was, I thought I'd feel embarrassed, but I wasn't. I just felt humbled. That was probably the best word to have. So, salute to my friend for taking his time to say such lovely things. We get to Steve's gaming next. I have to do that. It's my, you know how you do those handshakes where you go, that's Steve's. Now, he made me laugh this week because he's doing these 16-bit challenges with London. I do apologise for ruining people's names on YouTube. London Retro Gaming, I think. Where they're doing this challenge where one person introduces a 16-bit game, and he then wants you to mention an 8-bit game for him to play. So we go away playing one game, but he gets something like 16 games to play. Great for if you're that side of the fence, because you get to play a damn sight more variety of games than the other way, where you're just playing the one that he introduces. I thought that was clever. Anyway, this week it was Streets of Rage, and oh my God, is this a genre that Steve does not like? You should. I'm so proud that he didn't swear so much, but it was like, oh come on, how slow is this? Oh look, he's found a hamburger in another telephone box. Oh, now it's got to plod along. Why is it does this bloody great big hand grenade not blow me up, but it blows everybody else? Obviously, these are the things that I like. I'm taking a game to bits, not for the enjoyment of the game. And then he gives the game that every person's got to play. Good luck with that one, and Jumping Jack, if you've ever seen Mainmeister try and play that game. And then, of course, he showed a version of the Goonies game on an Intellivision. And I am like him by stating that the Intellivision is underused. It always seems to be the ColecoVision and the Atari VCS system. The Intellivision always gets slanted as the third. And in many cases, the Intellivision superseded the Coleco. And they both superseded the VCS because they came out a couple of years later. But good for you for showing that. And it was a great game. Absolutely marvellous. Now, then we get to Robert's Retro Gaming, or what do we call him? Conveyor Belt Rob? Or do we call him Production Line Rob? Anyway, he continues to do his Minecraft stuff. I'm a little bit behind with that, Rob. I do apologise. It's just that since the server went off, I haven't really gone back to Minecraft. But then you've done your Atari 8-bit stuff, and you did a little bit on Zektor, which was last week's high score kerfuffle. Very entertaining, all of it. Absolutely fantastic, actually. It's nice to see people attempt to do something outside of their comfort zone. So, love that. And of course, he did. He's done more 2600 stuff, I think, this week. Did Crazy Climber this week. That was a very interesting and lovely one. Then Down the Rabbit Hole. Down the Rabbit Hole did a great video just before the weekend started for me, because it's Atari's 50th anniversary, and he's bought the PS5 version of this 50th anniversary set. Now, anybody that's watched my gaming histories will know that I had the Atari from about 1978 going through to about 83, I think it was, I would have had an Atari all the way through those years, whether it be the 8-bit computers or whether it be the VCS system. So when a system comes out where it's the 50th anniversary and it's been designed like a museum where you learn something plus play the games, I got interested. But then the conundrum is, which one do you buy? Do you buy the Switch one? Do you buy the PC one? Do you buy the PS5 one? Do you buy the Xbox one? Down the rabbit hole didn't do that. That's a deliberation that I'm going to have to make a little bit down the line. It is quite expensive. It's £30, and that's quite an expensive setup. There's about 100 games in it, by the way. Some of them are hidden as well, Easter eggs, and they're mostly Atari 2600s, and a lot of it you can emulate. That's not the point. The point is it's a history lesson with the actual games inbuilt in it, and there are some enhanced versions in there as well. And of course, if you never had a Jaguar, you can now get to play, Tempest and things like that, on these systems, because the Jaguar and the Lynx is there. Not in great numbers, but you now have a way of doing that without going, the full emulation and downloading illegal, ROMs. So it's something I'm considering to buy. Not quite sure which one. It's not an easy, no-brainer, this one. If I put it on my PC, then my controlling system is not great, but I can capture it. If I put it on my PS5, I've got no way of capturing it, but I've got the nice controller. If I put it on the Switch, it could be the most lowest powered of all the versions. It might not get as many updates, but it has everything, the touchscreen, the joypads. The people that have got the best version really are the people that buy the PC version and have a Steam Deck. Those people are blessed. There you go. So Mainmeister, you now have a way of playing a 50th anniversary collection on your expensive PC handheld. So after that, Ponder, he did one of his cycling adventures. Always interesting, his cycling adventures. I feel for him a lot. He has to get to work. He bikes to work. That's energy efficient for him. Very healthy for him. Some of these idiots on the road. The only downside I've got about it is I don't see many of his videos have in other words, he's got 170 of these videos out there. Not every single one of them has got an Audi on it. But every time he comes across an Audi, I hear him say, typical Audi driver. And I'm an Audi driver. I'm not. I must be a non-typical Audi driver. I'd never do that to these people. There might be a time where it happens and it's because of something else. But it's always a fun watch. But I feel bad because I'm an Audi driver and he hates them, it seems. Anyway, and the last one is Big Juffer. Big Juffer showed off a Steam game called Gunvein. And this was just again at the beginning of the weekend. And it's one of those bullet hells. And I'm really sorely tempted to get it because A, the price is right, and B, I don't give enough effort into trying to play these bullet hells. I always find them intimidating. Wow, get away from that intimidation. Do something different, Del Boy. So, yeah, why not? So I probably will, after this, go and get Gunvein. What have I been watching on TV and in the movies? So, this week I watched The Zen Diaries of Gary Shandling, parts 1 and 2. My God, this was 4 hours. So, in 2 parts. And Gary Shandling is one of those people that I got introduced to because of a obscure BBC 2 show called The Gary Shandling Show. And I'm not sure if it was the end of the 70s, beginning of the 80s, or whether it was just the early 80s. But I was hooked on it because it was such a weird show. It was obviously like a sitcom, but it was just him talking to the camera. People would wander in and out, to move a storyline along. But the thing that hooked me was the main theme to his show, because It really wasn't a main theme. It was, this is the theme to Gary's show, the opening theme to Gary's show. Gary rang me up and said, would I write his theme song? That's the words. And it's like, well, it's not a theme. But it is, it's a theme. So it was very interesting to know, because he died at a very early age, about how he got into comedy. All of that stuff, historically, I'm interested in, because it's all along the time of when John Belushi was around. You know, we're talking late 70s, early 80s. And he was an electrician for a number of years. So that was definitely worth a watch if you're into comedy history and what made them what they are. Then I watched Werewolf by Night, which is an old Marvel production, because it's been out for about a month and a half and I've only just got round to watching it. It's on the Disney Plus. It is based on the comic. It's nothing like the comic, really. Werewolf, yeah. Characters' names, yeah. But it's not really, if you ever read the comic. But I really enjoyed it, and it's a one-off. It's not like 5 episodes. It's one episode, almost like a film. Enjoyed it. That's all I can say. I managed to finish as well The Devil's Hour, which has got Peter Capaldi in it. There were 6 episodes. I think I thought I'd finished it last week, but actually I'd watched 5 episodes. The 6th episode finished it off. Really enjoyed that. And then one other documentary I watched this week was the Sound of 007 documentary on Prime. It's free to Prime owners. It goes all the way from Dr. No. It talks about the instruments used, the actual themes themselves, the composition during the film. So there's lots of interviews with David Arnold and so forth. Brilliant documentary, really enjoyed that. But then again, I've got a very big history with James Bond music. And then yesterday I went to see at the cinema Black Panther Wakanda Forever. The only thing I can say about that is that they handled it really well when you consider about Chadwick Boseman dying. You'd think that would be the end of the franchise. They handled that really well. I'm not going to give any spoilers away. But like a lot of Marvel stuff, it's a bit long. This is 15 minutes short of 3 hours, this film. And to be quite honest, I didn't feel like there was too much padding in the middle. It was an entertaining film. But I think anybody, even people that have watched Dancing with Wolves and, those sort of films where there's been an extended version, you just go, my arse aches. I've been sitting on my backside for 3 hours. The seats were atrocious. I ran out of food. There'll always be something. And you won't be therefore talking about the film. It'll all be about the hurt you got through to get to the end of 3 hours. It's worth watching. I'm not going to give it away. So, nearing the end, thank God. This week, I've done my gaming history, 1978 Space Invaders. Really enjoyed doing that. I like doing those because not only do I get to edit something together and I feel maybe it's a bit more polished than the raw blog you see, but it's remembering those times. That's the thing. I go back to my diaries. I have to read my own writing. I then have to correlate it with something that's on the internet that says, oh yes, that did go on and this was the reason behind it. Along with a load of other diagrams that I've got in my diaries that list mazes and things and stuff. Nerdy stuff. I played a game called Super Space Tower, which is like if Nebulous and Thrust had a baby. Very much Thrust glued around a cylinder, puzzles, time limits, get there, brilliant game, lots of levels, bit pricey, and it needs an editor, a game editor. And then of course there's my blog from last week. which introduces me really quite well into giving you an answer to the question last week. It wasn't really a question, it was a musical skit of about 6 seconds. And I asked you what the film was, what the composer was, and what was the controversial part of the music, is what I was trying to get at. Most of you got 2 out of 3. And I wouldn't say that you got the controversy bit wrong, because you might have misunderstood the question based on the fact that I was looking, because I was playing a piece of tune, that was the controversial aspect of it, was the tune, right? So, of course, it was Total Recall, it was Jerry Goldsmith, and the controversial aspect of it is about 6 months afterwards, and when the soundtrack came out, people thought that Jerry Goldsmith had plagiarized an earlier tune by Basil Polidorius for the film Conan the Barbarian. And that's because they both start exactly the same, with the same instruments at the same beat and the same drum sound. So then they split off and do their own thing. In later interviews, nobody outrightly wrote to Jerry Goldsmith and said, you plagiarized this. But he did happen to mention and said that when the film was being made, there was a place point for the titles, and they played Conan the Barbarian's tune just as a place point. The director came up to Jerry Goldsmith and said, I like that sound, can you replicate it yourself? And apparently it's an Arnold Schwarzenegger film in Conan, as it is in Total Recall. So he didn't plagiarize, but basically the intro is a homage to that place point to then go into its own tune. And I think that's the best way to do it. I don't think anybody that's in the music industry really, I think they have a bad rep on plagiarism, because there's a limit. There isn't limitless possibilities on music, but there's quite a lot of room. But you will come across, when you get to chords, that for it to be musically correct, a chord has to go into another chord and then into another chord, and it will then sound similar to something that you've heard before. Go figure. Let me get to the topic, the question, and what I've seen this week. So, topic: Christmas advertising. I've got a vent really on this. I'm now seeing tubs of chocolate since the late October, decorations for sale in my supermarket since the first week of November. Sky Christmas Movies is now a thing on Sky since this week, along with the store adverts starting at the beginning of this week for Debenhams, Marks and Spencers, etc., etc. Is this too early? Question mark is the topic. My answer to this stupid bloody question: yes, it is too damn early. But really, yeah, is it too early? Kids get excited and all of that sort of stuff. But I also think to myself, the pressure that mums and dads are under at the moment, paying the electricity bill, getting food, and the kids are now seeing all the things that they want to have Father Christmas get to them. And these people have got a right to Father Christmas, and Father Christmas has got to get them to them in a world that really doesn't accommodate that at the moment. Let's hope that the end of the year ends better. But is Christmas too early? For me, yes. The question for this week: very, very simple. You don't have to join in with this one. It is movie related again. Quite a simple one if you think about it. Especially, I'll give you a clue, especially if you think about who my favourite director is. So, question: who went on a crime spree across Southern America after killing a would-be rapist? Read that back. Who went on a crime spree across Southern America after killing a would-be rapist? And just now, we've got what's arrived this week, and there's been a load. Now, I didn't do this last week, so the two things that I should have put up last week were these two. Maverick. And you'll say to yourself, why has he got two of them? One's lenticular. one's steel. Well, they're both steel books, but one's got a lenticular front. Don't know if you can see that. Rabbit asked me, what did I think of the film? I liked it, Rabbit. I tell you what, it's got one of the best pictures that you've got. The sound is very good. The story is what I was expecting. It's how it should have been done. He's moved on. He's older. You know, Iceman, his best friend, has boosted him up. And it's the story I thought it should have been. And the only downside I have of it is I still would love to have known how Tony Scott would have directed it. We'll never know. But really enjoyed it. I hope that answers that question. We got Halo Steel book. I watched the first couple of episodes on the new Paramount channel. Thought it was good. Didn't get to the end. I've now got the Steel book of it. It is the 35th anniversary of The Running Man. This is a Steel book. First time in 4K. No brainer. Got that one. They've just brought out a 4K version of The War of the Worlds with a Blu-ray of When Worlds Collide. Two of my favourite 50s science fiction films. It was Denny that introduced, told me that his version that's come from the States, he noted that they've still got Mars as blue, as the colour blue, and I knew of that in the versions that I've had on DVD. This version is no different. It's the same transfer. Weird that it has got an orange tint, but Mars isn't blue. Then there is a 2-film edition steelbook of Creed and Creed 2. That just puts things nicely into a nice sort of like case. I've got them both, but one is 4K and one is Blu-ray because I've got them as steel books. I now have them both in one steel book and both 4K. So I've got room to move in regards to getting rid of some stuff. Then there's the Polar Express, which was a nice little Christmassy film. Not the best or anything. Ahead of its time a little bit with the animation. It's a 4K edition. It should look good. Don't have too many 4K ray tracing films. We've got the latest Doctor Who specials, but only because I've got every steel book of Doctor Who. So as a collector, I therefore pick up the collector's edition of this. It will probably remain in its cellophane through its whole life. Enough said about that. And then the last one is Brad Pitt's Bullet Train. Don't know too much about this one. I saw a trailer of it. It looked quite good. Not a big Brad Pitt fan, but he's not that terrible either. Easy on the eye. Set on a train, which means it'll be a bit claustrophobic. I thought give it a punt. So I'll be doing that tonight or tomorrow. And that's the end. Thank you so much. I always say that, don't I? Thank you so much. But I mean it. Again, this one's gone on a bit. I hope I've answered everything correctly. And I really, really do look forward to these blogs. They make my week, really. So much for me to be sort of like blessed about, really. We're approaching Christmas. I'll be looking forward to that. I've got some ideas about moving forward with this blog. I might do a live one day just to scare the lot of you. I might, if I ever work out how to do it, bring guests in to have a chat. Don't know how to do that though. This is where I have to ask questions to people like Mainmeister and that. I continue to better myself. I'm currently doing all sorts of little effects work on how to write my own title sequence. Very jealous of Steve and his title sequence, and that I realise that when my blogs and things open, it's just me sitting in a chair going, hello, you know what I mean? So some things are changing, hopefully for the better. And please, thank you for and thank you for all of your support. Your comments mean more to me than anything. And here's to the next one, and hope to see you on this same bat channel at the same bat time. Not that it will be. Bye bye.